sorts of, we used to eat food, sacrifice to idols, eat food not slaughtered in Allah's name properly. Used to commit all sorts of sexual indecencies. And then Allah sent to us a prophet, whose lineage we knew, whose trustworthiness we knew, whose truthfulness we knew. We had confidence in him. Okay? His life told us that he's trustworthy. Okay? And he called us to Allah. To single out Allah alone and not associate others along with Allah. And we followed him in this. And he told us to speak truthfully. He told us to fulfill our promises and pacts. He told us don't bury our daughters alive. He told us to pray. He told us to give in charity. Those are essentially said. And if someone says, yeah, but I know it, it's not the point of knowing it, it's the point of doing it. How many of us are quite often untruthful in our speech? How much do we really give in charity when compared to how much I spend on myself? And of course, spending on ourselves is halal. But there is a point, isn't there? Beyond which it becomes a bit grotesque and greedy. Prayer. Okay. Trustworthiness. When the non-Muslims, with all of their various ideas about who we are and what we stand for, when they look at us, do they think, funny odd people, got some right extremists amongst them, but on the whole they're very trustworthy? Or do they see us no better or no worse than all the other people on this island? If they see us no better or no worse, we're fair. How doesn't the moral high standard of the Sunnah, how does it not shine out on us? Why? What, because we're being treated unfairly? Is that an excuse to do haram? So you can see where and if we continue like that, then Allah will permit your humiliation. Don't think about anything else other than the words of the Prophet, Allah and His Rasul. The Prophet said, and Allah has told him this, Allah will permit your humiliation and He won't lift it from you until, there's a shart, there's a condition, until you do what? You return to practicing your religion, making sure that it is the religion you're practicing, not culture, not your own whims and desires, but it's deen that we're practicing. That may take time to slowly educate ourselves and return our souls back to God, or connect our souls back to Allah, connect our hearts back to His deen. But even if it's one act at a time, even if it's one step at a time, we need to do this until Allah, in His grace, in His fadl, sees that, yes, I will lift this humiliation from them, because they've made some level of collective effort in returning to the deen. And I won't be embarrassed to say this. And I believe that I can justify what I say as well, with the words of the ulama, that I can tell you, and I'm quite interested in politics of sorts. It's not my greatest passion, but it's there. And I can tell you bits and bobs, as you can tell me bits and bobs. And that will be beneficial. But it will never be as beneficial as when you tell me something or I tell you something which actually makes us, our hearts, thank Allah or fear Allah or hope in Allah or have a ta'zeem of Allah, honor Allah, and then our limbs go and do the deeds that Allah wants of us. And I don't know how things have changed, though I do believe things have changed somewhat for the better. But you know what, in the 80s we used to go on these marches. I don't know if you ever went on any of these marches, marching for Palestine. We'd get in the coach, we'd all meet down. You know, this was a nationwide thing, right? In the early 80s, marching for Palestine, because the intifadas were just beginning to start in the 80s. In the 80s as well, there were Hindu extremism was beginning to gel itself in India and have some real serious impact upon the Muslims of India, and Barbary Mosque, and we used to do all these marches organised by all these political, and sometimes there used to be thousands of Muslims on some of these marches. And when the Sheikh or the Maulana gave the adhan and told the congregation of thousands to pray, it would be sometimes few hundreds, sometimes less than 100. Same thing, mid-80s, we're in the Royal Albert Hall because Ahmed Didat, rahmatullah alayhi wa afu anhu, is debating some Christian, right, exposing the fallacies of what is left of Christian scripture, and trying to give izzah to Islam in the way that he knew best. And the hall will be packed mostly with Muslims, right? There will be a few hundred non-Muslims, right? But mostly with Muslims. And come time for prayer, bang in the middle of, it's Maghrib prayer. So it's not like you can, 2-3 hours later you can go home and pray. It's like one of the prayers that just has to be done more or less there. And all of us who are cheering, yes, whatever, whether it's right or wrong to cheer when Sheikh Ahmed Didat makes a point. He's not a sheikh in that sense, but Sheikh Ahmed made a point. But then only a handful will pray Maghrib. How many times have I seen in my grown-up life, okay, as I was growing up, and many of the people will share similar experiences, where the elders of the community, mostly men, will discuss religion really passionately. And then it came time for the prayer, and only a handful. In the mind of a young 15-year-old, 14, 13, you think, okay, prayer is important. It can't be that important, right? It can't be that important. Where every wedding you go to, every little gathering that you have, people are always talking about religion, but when it comes time for prayer, it's like, oh, Napak. Napak, right? I didn't know what Napak was at that time, right? Okay. But when you learn Napak, someone is just basically, I'm najis. Alright, don't touch me. So the first thing is really getting down to the basics of Islam and just trying to live that Islam. We will see Allah will unfold for us so much khair, so much beauty, so much grace. The second point was when Abu Walid, Utbah, came to the Prophet at some point when the dawah is open, and it's now causing a problem in Makkah, and the big chiefs of the Makkah, they're saying, we can't deal with this, it's splitting families, and it's kind of may even ruin our trade and our reputation. So they come to the Prophet with what? An offer of compromise. And as political offers go, wow, this was something really good, right? I mean, if our government gave this to us today, there wouldn't be a single one of us except we will take it. Which was what? If you started this affair in order to be the richest amongst you, so be it. We will gather together our wealth and we'll make you the richest amongst us. If you started this affair so that you can become king, we'll make you our king and we won't take any decision except first consulting you. If you want political authority over us, we will make you our political leader. If you're possessed, we'll get our money together and we'll get the best doctor to cure him. So he's offered political power, wealth, economic power and political power. You have that, and from the worldly point of view, Bob's your uncle, right? Just as a side point, in World War II, when the Third Reich, when Nazi Germany was on the ascendancy, barring this small little island, the island that we're actually on, much of mainland Europe toppled to the mighty force and the advanced technology and the well-organized German army. Right? And an army which was the most sophisticated army at that time. The tanks that it had and the technology it had, it's not that they were leap years ahead of us, but they had a head start, right? Because some of the greatest minds were there. But tanks, guns, motorcycles, cars, what do they all need? Apart from drivers. Fuel. And what was the fuel that they were using, as we use today? Oil. And oil was drastically running out. Europe isn't a natural haven for oil. It was running out. Round about the same time as the war was coming to a close, as the German army was losing ground a bit, and they were also beginning to lose oil. So a lot of their machinery they couldn't use anymore, even if they had the manpower. Some of their tanks in the thousands were just lying there. At the same time, America, almost on the 11th hour, entered World War II. And she had already struck a deal. The United States had already struck a deal with the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, okay, on one of the American flagships, okay, that you give us cheap oil, that's the Americans asking, President Roosevelt, I think, you give us cheap oil, and we will give you security, meaning that we will protect your kingdom from outside threats. And a deal was struck, which is a deal that lasts even today. So here is America. Not only did she enter the war late, so she's not tired. You know, she enters the boxing match on the 11th round out of 12. So of course you're all ready and you're all, you know, whereas a guy who's been slogging out for 10 rounds, right, he's on his last legs, right? Which is what the rest of Europe and Germany were. But she had all of that oil. And because she had all that oil, from 1945 onwards, the ball was in her court politically. Now she invades, from that time onwards, and slightly before, she invaded whom she wanted, and she continues to do so, America as a nation. What I'm trying to say is, political and economic power is a huge thing, and yet he starts to deny it. He refused it. Because it's not about economics and politics, it's about Tawheed. Of course, a state will help. Political power and economics does help spread Tawheed, but make sure the roots are planted first on Tawheed and nothing eclipses it. So that was the second lesson, and we now come to in a very long way, the third lesson that I'd like to mention. So Islam is essentialized. 2, politics must not eclipse the religious essentials. 3, working for the welfare of individuals and society. So what do we have here? وقد شهد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم هذا الحلف فقد روى حميدي عن محمد بن عبد الرحمن بن أبي بكر قال, they said, قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. So through a chain, through Al-Humaydi, he relates that the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم said, لقد شهدت في دار عبد الله بن جدعان حلفا لو دعيت به في الإسلام لأجبته. The Prophet ﷺ said, and now the Prophet ﷺ is maybe 50-55, he's already establishing Nubuwwah. He said, لَقَدْ شَهِدْتُ فِي دَارِ عَبْدُ اللَّهِ بْنِ جُدْعَانَ. I witnessed in the house of Abdullah ibn Jud'an a hilf, a pact, which even now, if I was called to it in Islam, I would respond. What happens? Some Yemeni guy comes from Yemen, and he says to one of the well-to-do Makkans, do you want me to do some work? And the Makkan said, yeah, do some work for me. And so with his own wood and with his own hands and with his own tools, he did some work. I can't remember what work, but he built something for him. Now the Makkan knows he's on home turf. He's got the whole clan with him. It's Makkah. This Yemeni is hundreds and hundreds of miles away from home. Okay? So the Yemeni says, can I have my money? They said, no, I'm not going to pay you. No, but I've done your work. Well, go away. Because the Makkan knows. What's he going to do? And this has happened many a time before. Maybe not with that particular person's, but it's happened before. Where the rich or the well-to-do just tread upon the poor, the needy, or the vulnerable. In this case, he's vulnerable. So he's like, but this is unjust. Now this Yemeni had some fire in him. So he gets on Mount Safa and he says, oh Quraysh. And he's appealing to, oh Quraysh, you're meant to be dignified and honourable, but actually one of you lot, one of your own, is lying, is behaving dishonourably, and he explains what. And by that time he has an audience around him. And by this time, some of the Quraysh leaders, they're thinking, oh no, not again. They've seen it happen before, and they know, some of the wise ones amongst them know that if every time someone's going to make a complaint which is true, it's going to dent our reputation, our nobility. And the Quraysh were very cautious of their noble name. Some of these Quraysh had already been up north, to Syria, to Palestine, to Persia. And they'd seen that in Syria and in Persia you can get justice. There are courts. There is a law process. Even if it doesn't work 100%, but it works well, fairly well. And over here in Mecca, it's just tribes. We fight another tribe because they're the other tribe. Okay? Not for justice or injustice, just for asabiyah, for hizbiyah, for partisanship. So they're thinking of these things as well, maybe. And they're thinking about their reputation, they're thinking about, some of them probably thinking, why can't we have some kind of thing like that? And so some of the elders gathered together in the house of Abdullah ibn Jud'an. And these are non-Muslims, right? They're mushriks. They're upon the deen of what the Arabs are upon at that time. And they swore a pact. And they said, if any one of us, we see an injustice, an act of dhulm, injustice done by any of us, then we will all group together to fix that injustice, to correct it, even if it be going against one of our own tribe members. This is like, wow, this is serious, that never happened. As far as the Arabs could recall in their history, nothing like this ever happened. That actually the principle will be justice, not party or tribe. And that's what they did, and this became the Hilf al-Fudul. And there are at least two reasons why it's called Hilf al-Fudul. Either because Fudul can mean something virtuous, and it was a pact of virtue, or there was Fadl ibn Abbas and Fadl ibn somebody, and there were some main signatories to this. They were called Fadl ibn something. There was quite a few Fadl ibn somebodies. Okay, so the pact of the Fadls became Fudul. So one or the other. And the Prophet was young. His uncle brought him along, not because the Prophet was going to sign. He's young. He's between 12 to 15 years old. But uncle is part of it, and he's just taking his nephew along. So the Prophet witnessed it. And then what does he say? If I were called to it now, then I would respond. Hold on a minute. But this pact is made by the mushrikun, by the kuffar, the unbelievers, not Muslims. So why is the Prophet saying he will respond? He will put his hand with this pact. Because what counts is the principle upon which a pact, an agreement is established, not who establishes it. If there was a pact which would allow justice to spread, and it was initiated by non-Muslims, then it would be something shar'an, religiously permissible or recommended or obligated for Muslims to partake in, if that was the case. So we learn that do good and work for the welfare of society, and put your hand with the doers of good, regardless if they're Muslims or not, provided the principle is clear and it actually works on the ground. Okay? And by working on the ground, I mean politicians, not just today, but from time immemorial, they promise good things, right? Okay, election day, elections coming up, all the politicians are promising. But 3/4 of those promises are purposely going to be trash. And a quarter of them, maybe more than 50% of the remaining quarter aren't going to be fulfilled, not because they didn't want to, because they can't. It's just the nature of politics. Okay. So Islam doesn't look at the theory. It says, well, will it work on the ground? Is it working on the ground? If it is, we'll put our hands with you. If there is more good than harm, we'll put our hands with you. You're non-Muslims, but what counts is the principle. What counts is the principle. Okay. So this hadith, okay, which has various other narrations in the Muslim of Ahmed and others, tells us the principle. Work for the common good of society, even if it means one cooperates with those outside of our religious tradition. Because what counts is the doing of good and the principle, not who you work with. Okay? And how do we see society? We work for the welfare of society under a compassionate God. And because Allah is Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, because He sent a prophet, a Nabi Ar-Rahman, and because He wants us to be an ummah of Rahman, of compassion and mercy, and doing good to others, we do it with that understanding. And making Islam, rectifying society, doesn't all happen in one day or a week or a month or even in an individual's lifetime. It happens one step at a time, one deed at a time. And no matter how long it takes, the believer, the Muslim, is committed to the welfare of society until something of justice and compassion is established in society. Because there can be no well-being in society without justice and compassion. Justice to keep the law in order and the lawless in check, and compassion because there are always going to be needy and vulnerable in society. There are always going to be people well-to-do and people not so well-to-do. And the people who are well-to-do, they have an obligation to help the people who are not so well-to-do. Okay, this is the Islamic vision. You ask Muslims today, we don't even know that vision. I am surprised of how ignorant we are of just that simple vision. We actually think what the Islamic vision of society is had punishment here, capital punishment. That's just part of the law. That's a small part of the law. Haven't we read the Seerah of the Prophet? What? It's all full of capital punishment. No, it comes along in its place. The had punishment, the hudud, come along in its place as part of establishing justice. But the rule, the asl, the foundation is what? Justice, compassion, human welfare. خَيْرُ النَّاسِ أَنْفَعُهُمْ لِلنَّاسِ. The best of people are those who are of most benefit to others. How else do we understand that early on in Makkah, with the teachings of Tawheed, don't bury female daughters alive? These were any female daughters, because it's the wrong thing to do. Whether they're mushrik female daughters or Muslim female, you don't bury female daughters alive. Period. You don't do female infanticide. Help the poor. Treat the slave well. Be kind to the orphan. It doesn't matter if the orphan is a Muslim or not. The poor is a Muslim. This is a human being. Yes, of course there is Imaan and Islam. That's one thing. And there is Shirk and Kufr, which is the opposite thing. But just at the basic level, وَلَقَدْ كَرَمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ, we have honored humanity. What is this if this is not social, not engendering a social vision? What is this if this? And then look what happens. You and I know the story. Here is one of the great Qurayshi men, and he's set to become a future leader. Umar ibn al-Khattab, Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu. This man was set to become one of the great leaders of the Quraysh in his days of not on Islam. He had all the makings of. Still fairly young, but he had the makings of. And as a Qurayshi Arab, you know that you're superior to an Abyssinian slave, a black man. I'm Arab. This guy's black. He doesn't even have his freedom. But what does Umar radiallahu anhu say? Okay, in Islam, Hadith in Sahih Bukhari, our Sayyiduna freed our Sayyiduna. Our master, our Sayyid, and Sayyiduna Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, freed our master. Who? What master? That black Abyssinian slave, Sayyiduna Bilal radiallahu anhu, who Islam took him despite being him a slave, and at once upon a time his foot is on the Kaaba giving the adhan. Okay? And this man's maqam, station, is greater than most of the Arabs, Muslim Arabs. Right? How does that vision of Umar change? Our Sayyid frees our Sayyid. Because Islam has taught him to see with different eyes. Not to see the man as his social status that you and I have given him, but what has God given him of status and maqam. And then Al-Faruq is known for his justice. Umar is known for his justice, radiallahu anhu. Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu quite often known for his compassion. because justice and compassion. You know, Ibn Taymiyyah, rahmatullahi alayhi, in some of his books makes a remarkable point. Now, when I read it, and I was, you know, I remember I actually read it, and I was walking around these parts back in the late 80s. And Ibn Taymiyyah, rahmatullahi alayhi, makes a point. He said, you know, with human beings, you have some human beings who are a little bit strict. They have jalali qualities. Then you have some human beings who are more softer, jamali qualities. Stricter qualities, softer qualities. And he said, if you think of Musa alayhi salam, you put him on the stricter kind of side. Physically as well, Musa alayhi salam is like, mashallah. And Isa alayhi salam is, yeah, very opposite. And you think of Musa alayhi salam as very jalali, very majestic, awesome. And you think of Isa alayhi salam as very jamal, very soft and gentle. Okay. And then you think, in terms of non-prophets, Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, very jamali, Umar radiallahu anhu, very jalali. So Ibn Taymiyyah says, the wisdom of the Prophet is that he would pair up the jamal and the jalal so that they would balance each other and complement each other. The Prophet didn't need it because he's kamal. He had jalal and jamal in balance. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. But the rest of human beings need it. So he pairs up Abu Bakr with Umar. The jamali of Abu Bakr is complemented with the jalali of Umar and vice versa. Same thing with Abdurrahman ibn Auf, who is very jamali, and then he's paired up with a jalali person, and I can't remember who he mentions. Why? Because the Sahaba learned from the Prophet that we need to keep the human condition in balance. We can't have our family or society run on jalali or jamali. It needs to run on both. Each have their place and both come together to complement. Same thing with justice and compassion. So we need to work for the welfare. For those of us who are born here, this is home. For those of us who are naturalized here, this is home. For those of us here who are seeking political asylum, it's home as long as, you know, as far as we know. And even if it wasn't home, we're here. What we need to ask is, what good are we doing society? What charitable works are we doing? Not just to Muslims, to anybody who is in need. Is it the Muslims showing the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ in helping the poor, the needy, the vulnerable, in whatever level they can? This is not the only thing that we need to do. This is from the essence. There are other things as well, of course. There is dawah, there's teaching, there is this, there is standing up to politics, to political power and speaking truth to authority. But these are things that we need to do as well. And therefore, you know, for example, someone may say, I don't know, all these brothers that government has arrested because they're charging them with terrorism and saying that they've done Syria, they went to this place, maybe some of it's true, maybe a lot of it's falsehood. It's hard to work out. It would be nice if we started off with innocent until proven guilty. That would be really nice if we can go back to that. But you know what is clear is that when this brother is in prison or has been renditioned, na'udhu, he quite often has family and children. If he's not innocent, and we're not saying he's not innocent, the family is still innocent though, right? And how do they get supported? How does the wife support her children? 3 or 4 children? Doesn't even occur to me. Because I'm so wrapped up in my own little world. And yet at the same time, Abu Aaliyah has the nerve to say, oh brother, you know there are hundreds of our brothers. Go check on Cage website. Hundreds of our brothers who have been detained unlawfully, and right, there's hundreds, and that means there are hundreds of wives and children, or mothers, because sometimes brothers, they may be the one looking after their parents, and it doesn't occur to me. All I'm doing is cursing the government and the United States and telling you how illegal it is, and I'm speaking the haqq. Allah's not interested in just speaking the haqq. Do the haqq. Do the haqq. Hugs, for example, is an organisation that deals with just that type of thing. As an example, there may be other organisations, and if you know them, listen to them. All I'm trying to say is, and I'm a student of knowledge, really. Bi'idhnillah, my norm is that I study the Sharia sciences and have been doing it by the grace of Allah since the mid-80s. I still study with the ulama. 25, 30 years. What people call me Sheikh, I know I'm a talib al-ilm, student of knowledge. And I'm really academic. I love to read. I don't spend any time except I read a lot. But reading is one thing, but I should also bring into my life in a serious way khidmah, service to others. Not service to my parents, because that's an obligation I have to do. Right? It's a bit like, oh yeah, I'm so charitable, I give zakat. No, but brother, you have to give zakat. That's not being charitable, that's just fulfilling a wajib, a fard. You do service to your parents, but that's an obligation upon me. What beyond the obligation do I do of khidmah, of service? And this is why I made a point in the khutbah. Perhaps I didn't make it in a very, I don't think I made it in a very good way. The point is though, so I'm going to turn 50 in about a few days' time. Don't need to give me birthday cards. My point of saying this is, for most of my life, I lived in E11, Leytonstone, born and raised, and actually, or E4, Chingford, in the days when there was no non-white face in Chingford, apart Chingford Hall Estate, which used to be one of the largest housing estates in East London, okay, knocked down ages ago, except 3 families, 2 black families, 4 families, 2 black families, 2 Asian families, and I was one of them. Otherwise, everybody else was white, okay. And when I moved to Leytonstone, okay, it was even tougher for certain other reasons. So it's not been an easy ride, right? So I'm not silver spoon. And the reason why I say this is because most people think, not most, so many people have said to me over the years, we just assumed, maybe because of the way I talk or behave, that I've come from some like middle, upper class upbringing and whatever, silver spoon in the mouth and everything was rosy-dozy. That would have been nice, but no, that's not the case. Okay, born and raised in East London. I probably, and this is not a boast, it's just reality, I probably had more guns shoved down my eye, my nose, my throat, my back, than many of you had hot dinners, because in the 70s, it was really hard to get away from. But alhamdulillah, Allah helped me, Allah caused me to survive right now again. And yet, so when it comes to that kind of rough, tough, subhanAllah, I know, I'm not a rough, tough person, whatever. If I could run from a fight, I would, which I didn't, alhamdulillah. But that's by the by. What counts is how much does my character, this is my point, conform to the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. That's what a true man is. That's the point I was trying to make. Otherwise, when I see some of these youngsters on the street, I think, you know what, you had a cushy life. You've had a cushy life. Most of you have grown up with Muslims around you. Okay, the few things that you've got yourself involved in. Mine was a day-to-day struggle, right? If you're the only Asian on the block, in a housing estate that holds thousands of people, it's a rough ride. And it's the 70s, where you can't even trust the police to come to your aid because they see you as non-white. But it doesn't matter. But what I tell you is this, that's not being a man. That's just, thank you God for helping me survive. Being a man, a rajul, min al-rijal, is to fulfill our covenant with Allah and to connect to the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That's being a rajul, from the rijal, the men. So all of this gangster style toughness and rudeness and roughness, it doesn't cut with me at all. In fact, it makes me laugh because I've seen it and I've seen worse. But I'll tell you what as well. When the Russians were still in Afghanistan, and this has nothing to do with the mosque, and jihad has different types of, what's the word I'm thinking? Different types of? It's best if you help me here quickly before I trip up, because I've mentioned the big J word now. Different types of forms, that's the word I wanted. When the Russians were in Afghanistan, and Allah blessed myself and groups of brothers to go to the front line, we saw 12, 14-year-old boys who had more courage in their little finger than I have in my whole body. We saw 80-year-old men, okay, who had more piety and courage, in prayer and courage in the sense of fighting the jihad against the Russians, than I'll ever have. But I'm talking about the boys, 14-year-old. Those are men. As regards to some gangster Muslim on the street, behave yourself. Come on. Do you really think you're big in any way? So what if you can stick out your chest and push down someone? What does it mean? Because there'll come a time that you'll meet someone who will stick out their chest and push you down. Because everyone has someone better than them eventually. And what? But the Sunnah says, control your temper. Not control your temper when Abu Aaliyah is sitting on the prayer mat giving a nice dose and they say, oh, mashallah, boy's got a nice temper. No. How am I with my children? How am I with my wife? How am I with my parents as they get older and their decisions that they make tend not to be so wise as they once used to be? Because maybe senility is setting in, old age. How about when I don't get my rights? Where's my temper then? How about, am I worried about me? Because one of the reasons we get angry is that my ego, my pride has been dented. You have offended my pride and I become angry. That's how most of us get angry. But what about getting angry for the sake of Allah? Not just for my ego, not for my ego, but for Allah. But we're not ready to do that. When we're ready to do getting angry for the sake of Allah, according to the level Allah wants us to get angry at. And anger for the sake of Allah is not necessarily an emotional thing. It's a belief thing and maybe an action thing. When the Prophet said, he who loves for the sake of Allah and hates for the sake of Allah, gives for the sake of Allah, withholds for the sake of Allah, he has perfected his Imaan of faith. It doesn't mean, ha! Like that. And then what I do, ha! Whoa, Abu Aaliyah, whoa, he has anger. No, that's not anger for the sake of Allah. That's just, most of it is ego, nafs. And Allah's not interested in nafs. He doesn't accept nafs like that. But to have righteous anger at the level it should be, and to do the right thing, that's what Allah loves. So the third thing is, for today, how can I, if I'm not already doing it, how can I be a person of khidmah? Some of us won't have as much time as others, or ability as others. Let us in our lives do something extra with khidmah, service. If, however, we've not started with our family, children and parents, let's start with them now. And then work on the next level. If we have done something of that and we're doing that, let's do khidmah. And let's also see if we can do khidmah to non-Muslims as well. For two reasons. One, because they are human beings. And two, we also need to rectify some of the image of Islam. Not because they say so, but because it's in our deen to do so. Not because they say so. We don't put on good character because they like it. We don't do X, Y, Z because they want it. We do it for Allah. Hopefully they will like it. But we know that there will be things we will do for Allah that they will never like. We don't want to annoy them unnecessarily, but we're not going to bend over backwards and break our backs for anyone. Okay? This is what we really need. Then people will see. Then it will be harder. Surely it will be harder. Regardless of Europe's historical Islamophobia. Historically, Europe has been very Islamophobic. Not just of recent times and not post 9/11. The whole of European identity is based upon opposing Islam. If anyone knows medieval European history. Despite that, do we think that satirists and whomsoever could depict the Prophet in violent ways if most Muslims were not just not violent, which is the case, most of us are not violent like that, okay, but actually we were more than that. We weren't just neutral and not violent, but actually we were on the other scale, that we were at the forefront of society. in doing the prophetic virtue of helping the orphans and the poor and the needy, and that we lived for the poor. And if we could do the sunnah, live with the poor, which is a bit harder to do, but live for the poor at least. No. We are part of Western consumerism. We want to live for the rich. And we want to live like the rich. And if someone says, but is it haram? Of course it's not haram. This can be the fadl of Allah upon us. But it's not the sunnah for the heart to want to live like the rich for the sake of being rich. But if Allah puts richness there, then the sunnah is just accept whatever maqam or station that Allah has put you in. Rich or poor. Rich, we have to give shukr. Poor, we have to do sabr. But craving it for other than the sake of Allah, it's not the sunnah, even if it's halal. How can I be a man? And I barely speak to my parents now. And when I do, I'm on the mobile phone. I'm on Facebook, I'm on Twitter. Is that really manhood? It's not. It's crass vulgarism. Inna Allah la yughayyiru ma biqawmin. Please, let us look at the sunnah and understand the transformation it wants us to have or to take place in each of our souls. Don't think Islam is by, let me come to the mosque and put a hat on my head and grow my beard. That's not Islam. That's just one little aspect of Islam. One of them is clearly not an obligation, the hat. One of them is different over the beard. Is it haram to shave or is it makruh to shave? And coming to the mosque for prayer is different upon, is it fard to pray in jama'ah or is it sunnah mu'akkada to pray in jama'ah? Fard, and in the Hanbali school it's fard. In the other schools it's sunnah mu'akkada. Those are small parts of Islam. Small, significant, because every part of Islam is significant. But actually, what about the inward transformation? So, as I say to my students, let no one be a student of the Sharia sciences, the sacred Islamic sciences, except that they commit to some kind of khidmah with one of these charity organizations or something like that. Because being a talib al-ilm, a student of knowledge and learning academics is not what it's about. To follow them, to have the Muhammadan character, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. You and I know how charitable he is. How just money would just come in his hand and poof, out of his hand within an instant. Now, alhamdulillah, we are not required to do that, because if we did, I don't know about you, but I would be a failure. Alright? And alhamdulillah, we're not even required to do an Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, all of my goods give for Allah and His Messenger. What did you keep for yourself? I kept Allah and His Messenger for myself. Alhamdulillah, that's not a fard. It's not even a sunnah for us to do. Because again, if it was, then we'd really be in trouble. But at least let our life be giving. If I have got nothing tangible to give your time for the young Muslims. For young Muslims. If you can't, then at least make dua for their well-being. Not just your own children, your own grandchildren, the Muslim children. These are difficult times for Muslim children. When I say children, I don't mean 5, 6 years old, but it's difficult for them. I'm talking about youths especially. Young men, young women. Right? The distractions, the temptations, the pull on them. The social media that starts as soon as you get one of these when you're 6 or 7 years old, or 4 or 5 years old. There's so much, and you can say, yeah, it's all, I shouldn't use it. Fine, that's one thing, but now that they are, how am I relating to them? Okay, the Prophet really concerned himself with young people. Ibn Abbas was young, Ali radiallahu anhu was young, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud was young, and it just goes on, the list goes on, barring Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, barring Salman al-Farsi, barring Sayyidina Umar, they're just about, and and a handful of them. Most of them were just young. But he had that concern because the youth of today are the men of tomorrow. So if we don't have any other way of helping, but then we can help with our du'as. And we can curse the kuffar, or we can pray for their guidance. I won't give you an answer. I want you to do what you think the Prophet ﷺ would have done. And if you're not quite sure, go back to the seerah or attend Sheikh Mujahid who's doing the seerah. Attend Sheikh Mujahid's seerah talks. And very soon, in the Meccan time, you'll see how he sallallahu was. You'll see it in the Medinan time, though that might take a little bit longer getting there. And you'll see how he was. Don't neglect your home and your families. But learn to be inwardly transformed. Learn to live in the khidmah of others. Learn to stand up for justice. Learn to work for compassion in society. Whether it's a kufr society or it's a Muslim society. Whether we believe in voting, national elections, or whether we don't believe in voting, besides the point here. But there is no difference about working for the welfare. Tawheed, name me one single prophet that didn't come and rectify some moral error. They all came with Tawheed. And along with that, one of them came with, don't cheat in weighing up goods. Another one of them said, don't approach men the way that you should approach women. Another one of them came with this, and another one came with that. And the Prophet came with a few more extra because of the needs and the situation of the time. Okay? And we need to invest in the youths, the young people. I don't have answers. There are people who know this better. But I'll tell you one thing. It's natural, quite natural, and easy to go to one of the extremes. It takes a lot of guts to be extremely violent. When I say guts, I don't mean it in a praiseworthy way, I mean it in a negative way. It takes a lot of guts to be extreme violent. That's why the minority of human beings, when they're extreme, they'll be violent. That will be a minority. The normal way of being extreme is to go totally the other way and become wishy-washy in Islam. And there are two types of wishy-washiness in Islam. One of them is more problematic than the other. The first wishy-washy is simply weak Imaan. I know I should do this, but I don't. Astaghfirullah. I know this is haram for me, but astaghfirullah, I do it. Allah, please forgive me. That's a wishy-washy Islam. That's weakness of faith. But there's a lot of hope there. Then there is a wishy-washy whereby haram, halal, it doesn't really matter. I think it's okay. No, but God has made a judgment on it. Allah has made a judgment on it. The Prophet's sunnah has made the Prophet's words and teachings has made a decisive judgment on it. And the Quran says it is not fitting for a believer, man or woman, when a matter has been decided by Allah and His Messenger, that they should have any option about it, but rather they should accept it with the fullest conviction, the utmost surrender. This wishy-washiness actually impacts your very belief as a Muslim. Because he who makes the clear-cut halal, haram, the clear-cut, notice my words, clear-cut, things which no Muslim has an excuse for being ignorant about. He who makes the clear-cut halal, haram, or the clear-cut haram, halal, faqad kafar, has fallen into disbelief. Whoever says, I don't think I need to fast in Ramadan. Not because I'm a traveller, not because of some excuse of exams or whatever, even though that's not really an excuse. Just because I don't think so. 21st century, bro. Okay? If they can insist on that, even after they've been gently explained to, that, oh look, you know what, believe in it even if you don't do it. Because at least you'll be a Muslim, you'll just be a sinful Muslim. Right? But you'll be a Muslim though. But you have a different decision than God, and you deny a part of the Quran which is absolutely clear-cut in its ruling and injunction. You leave Islam, even if you were to fast. So the first one is a Muslim, even though he doesn't fast, but he believes that he should fast, and he believes he's sinful. And the second one is not a Muslim because he doesn't believe he should fast. He thinks that, well, I've got a different opinion than God, even if he fasts. So there are two types of wishy-washy. It's natural in these types of society to end up with the second type of wishy-washy. Okay? And you and I may think, well, that's not going to happen to me. And perhaps it won't, given our age, but it will to many people below. It will start with various things. ISIS is a good example, and I just want to finish there. ISIS are doing 101 things wrong, but they're doing 2 or 3 things right. Don't ask me what they are, because I can barely imagine what right they're doing. But now, whatever right they may do, not because they found out themselves that it's right and no one else is doing it, no, it's just they'll do something right. They pray, they fast, I'm assuming, right? They eat halal meat. Then all of a sudden, but that's what ISIS do, right? And you think, oh my gosh, well, ISIS is all baddies and whatever. So you want to kind of distance yourself from these people. And if we're not careful, we distance ourselves even from the right of what wrong people are doing. Even from the right of what Ahlul Bid'ah and the Fusaq and the Mujrimun are doing. And that's working. I can't even mention jihad now without some panic in me. Right? And not a single day of my life, alhamdulillah, have I ever called or initiated or anything of attacking some civilian in some non-war situation. And yet, let me think twice about jihad. So that word gets rubbed out of the vocabulary. And then some other word gets rubbed out of our religious vocabulary. And in the end, what we're left with, be nice, smile. That's what it means to be a good Muslim. Thank you very much. Right? Or the other way around, when we don't have scholars, we need to get the youths in. Well, they're not going to come to some boring talk like this, and you're right, they're not. Maybe get a band in, right? Get some rapsters in. Start doing a bit of hip-hop. Hey, stop sending these imams to madrasas and darul ulooms, send them to hip-hop factories, right? And then we'll get the youths in, they'll come in droves. Friday Jummah, leave the Jummah, let's just have a concert, right? We won't be able to fit in Camel Road, we'll have to go down to O2. But it's not about getting the numbers in, it's about worshipping God. We'd like to do it with numbers, but the numbers isn't the goal. It's significant, but it's not the goal. Allah is. And once we start on that road, it's a slippery road. And we might not see it, but societies have slipped down that road. Religious societies have. And so when you see one of our old ulama, wise ulama, you think, oh my gosh. And I used to, he doesn't even allow pictures. Oh, come on, ya Sheikh. You think, get in the 21st century, ya Sheikh. And he's like, look, but ya Sheikh, what about photographs with a camera? La yajuz, not permissible. Ya Sheikh, what about photos like, not forget the camera, just I'm staring at my iPad and I just click the button. Selfie. La yajuz, haram. Whoa. Because the Prophet said, and think, but there's so many other ulama that say, this could be permissible because it's just a reflection, it's not drawn with the hand. Okay, fine. There's a difference of opinion. But not the difference, I'm not worried about the difference of opinion. Look at my attitude to this sheikh. This is such a backward sheikh, right? And yet, this backward sheikh, who has lived his life in deep wisdom and knowledge, he's probably laughing at this backward Abu Aaliyah, saying, see, you take Abu Aaliyah's stance and the stance of whatever pictures, well actually what is this internet used for mostly? Deen, Numan Ali Khan, Hamza Yusuf, Yasir Qadi, used for deen or is it? No, pornographic sites. And I don't mean to expose anybody, but once upon a time when young naughty boys wanted pornography, they'd have to think of 2001 ways of going to their local corner shop and figuring out a way. If you get my point, then you get my point. If you don't, then it's not a big problem. Now you don't even have to think of anything. You're just online. And you don't even have to put in www. Khalas, it'll come up anyway. So maybe that old alim who's, oh my gosh, he's so 16th century. Maybe he had the wisdom. Greater than I do, but no, I'm really educated, whatever. So we need to be careful of those things. We need to. So, and I finish with a remark that Sheikh Mufti Taqi Hafidhullah Ta'ala told us in a gathering this year, at the beginning of this year. He said when he came here in the 1950s, late 1950s, with his father, whose father at that time was the main Mufti of Pakistan, Mufti Shafi Rahmatullah alayh. he said the few Muslims here asked that, look, there are not halal shops for miles and miles. And there is an opinion in Islam of eating the meat of the Ahlul Kitab, the Jews and the Christians. So why don't we just take that? And Sheikh Taqi said, my father said, no, don't do that. Rather, one, because there's a big issue about that amongst the ulama anyway from time. And two, establish your halal places and there'll be great fire. And he said, today, there isn't a street corner in the UK at least, except that there is halal. Okay, we have these things at HMZ and HFA and blah, 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 whatever. But we have halal meats, okay? And how did this come? Because the Shaykh had the insight for the long vision. The short vision was, oh, we need meat, halal, halal, let's get to some Ahlul Kitab. No, but the long vision is, you know what, set up, you will have your halal meat and your children will, and you will be no doubt about your halalness of your meat. And there will be no juristic difference around it. Look at the long-term thinking. And yet, you and I, and the majority of lay people, well-intended, educated Muslim lay people, we don't have that long-term vision because we don't have the fiqh, the wisdom, the depth, the istinbat, or the ibadah that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that we have given Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in that depth. But those type of ulama do. So be careful of dismissing those 16th century ulama, because we might find that quite often they have a wisdom that is far superior than the wisdom of the modern, well-spoken, well-articulated Muslim Mawlana, and Allah Jalla wa Ala knows best. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for khair and tawfiq. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. اللهم أيقظنا من الغفلات ونجنا من الدركات وكفر عنا الذنوب والسيئات واجعلنا من الراشدين. اللهم ألف بين قلوبنا وأصلح ذات بيننا واجعلنا من المسلمين. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين الحمد لله رب العالمين. Ya Allah, make us people of khidmah, make us people of sincerity, and make us people of brotherhood. Ameen. Barakallah. Allah